Hello, everyone. We are in chapter 4 of our book, which means that we are in the 5th week of our study of our book, The Attentive Life. I hope that you've been enjoying this book as much as I have been, as we are considering the ways in which we can become more attentive or more focused on what God is doing for us in our lives every single day. Chapter 4 is about prime time. I like that he labels this as our root system. Prime is that hour of the day when we pray not to get it over with, but to make everything a prayer. It's by David Steindl Rast there on the front page. I also like this metaphor that prime has been called, quote unquote, the drum roll of the day. You know what I mean by the drum roll? What's going to happen? That is prime time. We have come to understand prime time as far as television to be something that's in the evening, on a Monday evening at 7 o'clock or so. That's prime time, right? That's when all eyes are focused on the TV. But prime time in this regard is actually the time in which we are beginning our workday. So we've talked about worshiping God basically in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. We've talked about worshiping God as the sun is rising and waking to the voice of God that is speaking to us anew each day. And prime time is when we have taken our shower, we've gotten everything going, and we are getting ready to begin the work of the day. I have not always been good. You'll notice throughout this whole video series that I am confessing that I am not always good at paying attention and staying focused in the ways that I should. One of the ways that I certainly have not paid attention and focused in the way that I should, and this is almost embarrassing to say, but whenever I was in college, I lived in Irwinton, there in Wilkinson County, but I went to Georgia College and State University in Baldwin County in Milledgeville. So every day and every night, just about, I would wake up, I'd get in my truck, and then I would drive to my class. And then I would take my classes, and then I would go to work in the evening or whatever it was that I had, and then I would turn around and come home. Because I worked at Papa John's for a lot of time in college, I would help them close the store, and so there were lots and lots of nights that I would drive through the night at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., just trying to get back to the house and watching for deer and all of those things. And then I'd wake up and I'd start it all over again the next day. I'm embarrassed to say that because of how occupied I was with my time, my studies were certainly not as good or as strong as they could have been, especially in that time of my life. And for those first block courses that I would have to take at 8 and 9:30 a.m., I didn't have time to cram everything I needed in order to pass the quiz or the test that day. So I would wake up and I would throw all my clothes on and grab all my books and throw my backpack on if I'd even taken it out of the truck. And there were times when I would be driving up 441 in my truck, and I would have my book here like this, and I would be driving like this, and I would look down and up, down and up, down and up. And it was a very reckless way of driving, but it was all I could do to try and get ready for the events of the day. It just felt like I didn't have enough time to get everything done. It truly was a reckless way to spend my time. Looking back, I realize now I could have taken advantage of that 25-minute drive and 30-minute drive, and I could have focused and prepared a different way for my courses. But instead, I just rumbled right on through all of that, and I truly created a reckless situation that not only could have been a danger for myself, but also a danger for others as I was driving up that 4-lane highway with that big median in between. Now, fortunately, nothing ever happened as far as, something happening to my truck or something dangerous happening. And I didn't do this all the time, but I think about this as an example of what it's like to live our lives that way all the time. When we wake up and we rummage around and get everything ready and jump right into the events of the day, and we don't let our home life be separate from our work life, and all of a sudden work life is starting the moment we wake up because we're checking our phone and our text and our emails right there when we wake up. We're not allowing ourselves sometimes the space to really prepare for the events of the day and to get ourselves into a healthy place that will be healthy not only for us but also for others. And I'm reminded of that as I'm reading about this prime time, about this time that Leighton Ford is teaching us about, in which we are to be contemplative and to pay attention to what God is calling us to every day. I really like this quote from on page 84 about that Eugene Peterson. You've heard me quote him surely several times before, but pastor and teacher Eugene Peterson understands contemplation simply as living the biblical revelation. It has nothing to do with whether we spend our days as a greased monkey under an automobile or on our knees in a Benedictine choir. The contemplative life is not a special kind of life. It is the Christian life. Nothing more, but also nothing less, but lived. I have ended a few sermons recently by simply saying, listen, you know what you're supposed to do. Many times we try to be all poetic about things that the Lord has been telling us to do, and we find all kinds of metaphors and ways around it. But the reality is that lots of times we make things way more complicated than they actually are. Living a contemplative life is simply living your life as a Christian and giving God space in every part of your day. So I've written down just a few words here that I want to mention to you. The first is about crossing streets. This is when at the very beginning he says, he's quoting David Steindl Rast there. During Prime, we commit ourselves to do everything today in the same way that we teach children to cross a street. Stop, look, and then go. I like this metaphor of crossing streets. In fact, I've used it before in some of my own teachings, in saying that so oftentimes we rush through life, but oftentimes what God is calling us to do is to simply stop, pay attention to what we're doing, and then go. It doesn't take a long time. It's not a real complicated thing. It's just paying attention to what God might be calling you to in that space for that day. This is a long chapter, so there's lots of things about indwelling and abiding in God and all of these things. And I think that's all good. I think it's been useful. But I also have another word that's written here, and it's vows. On page 94, Leighton Ford talks about love as focused attention. I've possibly had this conversation with some of you before, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself. But I just recently did a wedding, and I had a conversation with the couple about their vows. And I like what Leighton Ford is talking about when he says that prime time in our lives is much like a couple that is preparing to get married, when a man leaves his mother and his father to cleave to the woman that he is going to marry and to be with for the rest of his life. This is focused attention, and this is what God is calling us to in prime time, is to be reminded of our vows that we have made to God, our commitments that we have made to God, that before we rush into all the stuff of marriage, all the stuff of work, and all the stuff of life, we just slow down, pay attention, and ask what God is calling us to as we have already committed ourselves to God through a covenant, the covenant of our salvation, the new covenant that is extended to us in Jesus Christ. And so I was reminded of these vows because I oftentimes tell young couples to pay attention to what they put in their vows, because because your vows are truly the contract of your marriage. And if you say a bunch of mushy-gushy stuff to each other on your wedding day, but you don't really vow anything serious to each other, then what happens when the mushy-gushy stuff goes away? What happens when life takes things that you were expecting to have away from you, and you're just leaning on the framework of your marriage, but all it was mushy-gushy goodness and kindness? And well, marriage is more than that, as is our relationship with God. And that's what prime time is all about, paying attention to your relationship with God before your day begins. So don't be reckless with the beginning of your day, the beginning of your work day, in the way that I was reckless trying to cram all the information I could as a college student getting to my classes. Give yourself this time and the space to slow down, to live your life as God would have you. I also think that you might be picking up that Leighton Ford is, what's the word? Leighton Ford is paralleling, is creating parallels between these divine hours and the phases of our life in a more general form. On page 21, you can see, I want to keep reminding you of page 21 because it really works as a rough outline for the rest of the chapter, where you can see all of the divine hours laid out. The divine hours, as traditionally practiced by the religious orders, usually include the following: and then vigils and lauds. Prime, the start of the day's work. Vigils is what it's like to be born and to be born in our Christian faith. Lauds is what it's like to be coming awake to our Christian faith. Prime is what does it mean to start practicing our Christian faith. Terce, the third hour, perhaps mid-morning, is when you start to figure it out and you begin to coast. And so Leighton Ford is drawing all of these things out as parallels to how many of us live our lives. Prime being the time in which someone is getting married or beginning their career or making big decisions in that post-adolescence, early adulthood phase. And it goes on all the way until compline, when the day is complete and sleep begins, which of course he's going to recognize as a pattern in which we as Christians follow as we pass away. And there is real peace to living our living our lives daily and across the course of our lives according to this rhythm of paying attention to what God is calling us to each day. So let me give you some encouragement to continue to do that. Thanks a lot, everyone, for tuning in. I hope that you've been enjoying this book as I have been. I hope you've been allowing it to be a part of your devotions. If you have any questions or thoughts, feel free to post them in the comments below. Until then, I'll catch you next week. See you guys.